也是首先讲
Well, I would like to address a few things.
就我们现在第一个是
Firstly,
说下个礼拜开始讲那个
beginning from next week, we will begin our class on the Bequeath Sutra by the Buddha.
佛陀要接近涅槃的时候
It is a sutra taught by the Buddha
就是称为叫小涅槃
before his parinirvana, and the last sutra he taught. So historically, it is called the Small Parinirvana Sutra.
开头啊就是就前
It
面
is
我记得
rather
有
short.
点难懂
I remember that at the beginning is a little bit difficult. So if you have time, you can
实亲论是好像说的田亲论是什么
look
就是它有一
into
个著述
Vasubandhu's commentary.
本来藏传佛教当中对实亲论是很重视的
Vasubandhu is
我想把
considered
它也
as
翻译出来但是它的不
a
管是
great
翻译的
master
问题还
in
是
Tibetan Buddhism, and initially I wanted to translate that particular commentary, but for some reason it's really difficult to understand, and I really can't translate it.
我只能是
After
把
many
这个比较近
attempts, I
的
really
经文
couldn't
呢
do that. So for that
翻成
reason,
藏文
I can
那么
only
下个礼拜
translate
开始呢我
the
们
Chinese version into
一个礼
Tibetan.
拜当中
In
应该
the
是如果没有特殊的话我们
next
星期
week
三不一定休息就一个礼拜当中
we will not
就
have
讲那
the
个
Wednesday off. We will
星期
continue
六和
to
星期天不讲就是这样
study
然后
the
再下一个星期的话
Bequeath
如果没有大
Sutra
的变化
for
的
the
话
entire
那可
week
能
without
就
much
边
of
讲比
large,
较就边讲保守
without
论
much
就是
of
这样
changes. We will
然
then
后
continue with our class on the
然后那
Uttara
个
Tantra Shastra as well.
再下个星期的话那还是同样
The
的
week after, we will have the same schedule.
这样的这个是呢跟在这里说一下
So that's something I wanted to
我们
address.
下个礼拜开始应该有
Beginning
书吧
from
就是那
next
个
week, we
比较近
will have our books ready.
以后在汉地弘扬
And
的话
I
呢
hope
应该很方
after
便
this teaching, you will be able
汉
to
地也是
also
很重要的
propagate
比较
the
近的有
teaching
好多的
in
这个教育
China
我们平时也
mainland.
经常用
There are lots of
这是第一个事情
teachings within
然
the
后第二
Bequeath
个事情
Sutra
的话
that
呢
is
我们这个
often quoted by
这
the
个
great
原始
masters.
学
So
员
it's
这
a
边
very
的话呢
great
就是今年也是所
study
有的这个
teaching to study
文字
together.
修行者的话呢
Also,
就是
for
各个
all of
班
our
都把那个
practitioners,
手记啊
the
就是都这个收了就是然后
practitioners
从这几年以来一直是这样
enrolled
的
in all the
那我们
classes
这边呢
so
也比较
will
特殊就是所
then
以现
hand
在
in
呢
all of your
并没有特别
cell
要求呢
phones.
这个大家必须把书籍
We haven't
交
really
上来
made
因为
that
要交上来
mandatory
有星
yet
期就要有给大家就是这样
because
的话呢
we
一方面
will
工作
have
量也
to
比较大
get the
另一
cell
方面
phones
的话呢
in
我
every
想我们
week
很
and
多人
then
都是来到这里呢
distributed
就是
back
应
every
该自己
weekend.
有自己的一个
I hope
目标
that
吧
you
就是不像
can
跟就是有些喇嘛和觉母就是所以
be
而且我们
clear
很多人
of
都是在
your
城市的各
focus.
种各样的
Many
这
of
些
you who
散乱就
actually
是已经升起
came
厌烦心了
to
如果你在
Larungar
激进地
out
方
of
还要天天玩手机的话
renunciation,
那这个人可能
the sense of
真的有一
renunciation
点这个
from
就
living
我
in
们可能
cities.
只
And
把一个
once
手
you
机收了的
already
话
moved
第
to
二个手机
Larungar,
也
if
可能
you
会
were
出现
to still
所
be
以
distracted
暂时
in
没有这样的但是呢
Larungar
大
by
家
the
也知道
cell
我们
phones,
这
then
个
what is the
这
point?
个喇嘛和觉母这边的话
So
呢
there's
就是
really
基
no
本上
point
凡是
to
入办的那
hand
个
in your
僧人的话
first
那
cell
这个
phone,
都
then
一
you
个
still have
必
a
须叫
spare cell
经
phone
验
to
的那个
use.
教务课的负责
The
呢
Lamas and
负责人的话
Jomos
呢也特别的强调
also
就是听说
do
必须执
exactly the
行
same.
就是这
It
样
is
的
mandatory
那
for
这
them
样
to
的话
hand
呢我
in
们
their
这
cell
边呢
phones throughout the
他们
week.
要求呢就是即便是那
And
个是负责
for
人
the
因为我们
Chinese
原来说
Sangha
负责
this
人
year,
就
it
是暂
is
时不
also
让这
made
个手不让的
mandatory
话
as
联
well.
系不上麻烦
Well, last
他
year
说
we
他
had
们说即
the
便是那个负
requirement
责人但
that
是呢
only
在
the
任何公共场
students,
合当中呢
the
这个不要用不
disciples
然的话可能
that need
这
to
个影
hand
响
in
不
their
好
cell
啊
phones.
所以我们这边
However,
呢如果
this
用
year
的太
it
多了
is
或者是大家
decided
都是
that
名正言
the
顺的那这
management
样的话
team
可能在这样的
who can
环境
use
当
their
中
cell
这样
phone
的
because
这个气
if
氛
there
当中的话
are
那可能不太妙啊就是我们
urgency
也
urgent
希望呢就是
situations
如果有
that
自
need
愿发
them,
愿的有
they
一些
need to show up.
这样的话
That
呢
being
就是
said,
在
they
这
do
个
need
自己坎
to
坷坎坷面
use
前呢
it
这个除了发信任意愿以外的话呢就是
in their
最
own
好是
time,
就是
but
暂时不
not
用因为一用了以
at
后
a
的话呢
public
就是
space
确实
because it
是
is not
对
a
眼睛
very
也不
good
好就再加
influence
上
to
是
the
特别
others.
这个花时间就是这个
Cell
这
phones
个是
in
一个梦
general,
就是
on
可以
one
说这是
hand,
一
it
个梦
is terrible for your eyes, on the other, destruction to your practice. So we can see that they are disruptive Mara forces. As a practitioner, we can see it like that. If you are not distracted, as a practitioner, that is not good. So we can cut off such distraction by handling your cell phones. For the staff members, people with their duties, of course, it's difficult for them to completely cut off the usage of cell phone, but it is better to then limit the usage of it. So cell phones in general, on one hand, it is not good for your mind. It creates distractions with all of those polluted information on. The second hand, it also is terrible for your eyes. Nowadays, people have terrible eyesight, mainly because of that too. And thirdly, it is not a good influence for your practice. Previously, I've thought about the usage of the cell phones. It is difficult to completely give up on cell phones because this is how our time is, and people do need this as a means of communication. On the other, I think for people with good discipline, then they will not be distracted by cell phones, but I think it's better to use various means to constrain the usage of it as well. There were people who tend to get very much distracted by their cell phones, and after this rule had been made into a mandatory requirement, then it seems that their practice and their study level recovered to their previous state. To me personally, I've been giving you classes on Madhyamika, on Sutrayana, on Mantrayana teachings. And though I'm not prolific in all aspects, I had studied extensively in those texts, and mainly because I weren't distracted by cell phones. I cannot say that I'm omniscient in all of those texts. Definitely not making that claim, but at least I'm not fooling you when I am giving you these teachings. When it comes to the sutras teachings, the commentaries of great masters, I had given you those teachings. So I think as someone who's willing to study in the sutras and the shastras, it is necessary to create the favorable condition of not having too much distractions. The second thing I would like to address is that I don't have too much time nowadays. Also, my health condition sometimes is good and sometimes not. I don't do IV drips during the pastime, but whenever I have some time, I wish to have some break. That is why I don't have the audience with anybody. I hope that the Khenpos and Khenmos can give Dharma teachings to some of the practitioners over here, because there are lots of the practitioners that came here to visit and don't have enough time to engage in practice, and I hope that the Khenpos and Khenmos can then take an hour or two to actually resolve their issues. And I hope that Khenpos and Khenmos can do it by yourself rather than outsource that task to others, because they may not be able to do it properly. So please, properly and truthfully, genuinely handle the issues. some of the Khenpos and Khmels, I hope that I see that they handle various kinds of issues in different methods, and sometimes their skillful means could be different too. And because of that difference, it is just like how there are different policies in various regions, and it could create various kinds of misunderstanding as well. In terms of that, I think it's necessary to have a sense of flexibility. At the same time, maintain principle. If there are some minor differences, that is fine. But when it comes to for example, the health of the practitioners, there are the ones that carry certain virus and carry certain, people may have certain illness, and if their illness is not contagious, then I think your way of dealing with the situation can be different. Also, people nowadays tend to spread rumors. I've mentioned this many times when it comes to dispelling certain people from the Sangha when they are not having appropriate actions or when they are not keeping their pure precepts, then of course there is no way to keep them in the Sangha, because this is something that Pontsuk Rinpoche also would do during his period of time. If people who then break their Samaya vows and so on, there are people who were dispelled for life, and they're the ones who are dispelled for a period of time. For example, the ones who don't listen to the instructions of the Lama, who do not, who would actually disrupt the atmosphere of the Sangha and create lots of troubles and so on. At the same time, they have not broken their Samaya vows or contaminated their pure precepts yet. So for those kinds of people, then temporarily they can be dispelled for 3 years, and then they have a period of time to adjust their behavior and their conduct, and then they are permitted to return upon correcting their behaviors. So if there are people who actually break their Samaya vows, I think it's necessary to dispel them, and if they can comply with that decision, they can leave here quietly. But if they were to create lots of disturbance within the Sangha, this is really not necessary. We don't want to destroy others, other practitioners at all, but I think it's necessary to know the sense of appropriation. We have to know what should be done skillfully. I myself am very careful when it comes to making decisions and having skillful means to relate to those Sangha. We had already studied that there are lots of merits to be in the Sangha, to respect the Sangha, and so on. At the same time, it is very risky when it comes to the dealing and handling with the Sangha members. Nagarjuna, for example, made the aspiration that may I not be reborn as the chanter, the Wumsi, or the management, the supervisor of the Sangha, because it's very easy for those people to, for example, create mistakes, make mistakes when chanting, or make mistakes when dealing with the fellow Sanghas. The third thing is that we recently encountered some obstacles. There are some, and I am actively involved in the in the process of resolving those issues. And tomorrow, I've heard that some authorities would be coming into Larangar, and some side would be planting trees and all that. And I think it's good. Well, we very much would appreciate that. We've planted many trees in the last few years, and if there are authorities who would come in and plant trees, of course, we appreciate that. We should treat others with respect and with right mindfulness. Some of the staff members here tend to feel quite threatened when there are authorities coming in. And it is said that there are the kinds of authorities that would treat the Han ethnic Sanghas very badly. I don't think it's necessarily an ethnic thing, but lots of our staff members who serve here and serve the Sangha, we have a group of them. The management team, the staff members who serve the Sangha, I hope all of these group of people, if you were to be spotted by the authorities, you can just simply tell them that you're here to serve the Sangha. I think it should be fine. I think everybody here is serving the Sangha in some aspects. Maybe with technical skills, maybe with certain kinds of professional skills, maybe just simply serve the Sangha. And if you were to be stopped by others and ask you what you're doing here and so on, even if you don't have some certificates to be staying here, we can deal with it after. It is not that the lamas and jomos all have their certificates to be permanent residents over here. So do not be so terrified of these kinds of incidents. Otherwise, after encountering small issues and small things, there are people who would just give up their role of being a Sangha, or who would give up their status of being a monastic, as Confucius say that there are different characteristics associated to people at a different age, at 20, at 30, at 40. For example, in people's 20s and 30s, they're very much attached to relationship and their family members. When people reach to the age of 50, they are quite aware of what life is, and at the age of 60, they are completely fine of listening to any kinds of speech. They won't get very excited, overexcited about any kinds of speech. I'm already over 60, and I'm completely at ease, whatever kinds of things I would hear. And I think for those of you who actually do feel a sense of disturbance of whatever you hear is also good, because then you can take that onto the path of practice. When Pantsukul Rinpoche was giving the teaching on the Nyingtik Gyabji back in 2000, and there was once that 40 cars are coming from 31 different kinds of departments all came to Larangar and dispelled many of our Sangha members, took down over 2,000 retreat cabins. And then Pantsukul Rinpoche told everyone that on one hand we should not disturb others' mind, and we should stand firm on our own ground, as well as not giving up on the three jewels that later became his final teaching, which is do not disturb others' path and do not give up on one's own path. And the third point is that do not give up on the three jewels. As a Buddhist, as a monastic, you should not give up on your own faith. Do not give up on the three jewels. Pantsukul Rinpoche clearly stated that.
就现在呢，就是因为春天嘛，就是
Now it is
今天
spring.
早上都是下，
This morning
还是昨天就是
or
也下了，
yesterday
虽然就是每年的，就春天的时候，
we
每
had
天早上
some
就是下一个小小的薄薄的那个白雪啊。
we had
我
some
们藏族
very
书话
sheer
当中说是
snow.
春天的时候呢，
And
每
in
天早上有
Tibet,
一
we
个
would say that
就
in
是
the
白雪，
early
每
spring,
一
we
个
would see
下
sheer
面一次的
snow
白雪的话，那
on
就
the
是
ground,
来一
and
个那个
every
就是鸟，
sheer
就是因为什么布谷鸟啊，就是春天很多
every
就是
time
冬天到
that
比
sheer
较
snow would
就是
welcome
那
a
种温
different
暖的
type
地
of
方去的那
bird.
些鸟呢，就
All
就
of
回来了。
those
所以说这
migrate
是一个
birds
很好
would
的
return, and
那
that
种
is
这
the
个标
best
志，知道
time
吧？
of the
这没有
year.
什么
Those
看
are
法，就
the
那
best
天我们这
kinds
边
of
有一个
signs and
看报，就是
omens.
然后他在
The
那
other
个
day,
就
a
发信息
Kempo
问我，你
sent
在
sent
干
me a
什么？
message and
我说
asking
我一
me
个人
what
煮饭。
I am doing,
然后
and
他
I
就
told him that I was
他就
cooking
这
by
个后来
myself,
呢，就
and
是没
he
有直接
later
翻译，这是什么意思呢？就是那天我回来
he
的时候
later
问我，就是
wondered by
这
himself
这个
what
什么
it
意思？就是他
meant.
担心，就是是不是我一个
And
人
he
在
was
干什么，有点担心。我说没有什么，我确实在那
he
个时候
was
正在做
worried
饭。
about me, and try to figure out what my hidden meaning is. What did I mean by
他就
cooking
不
by
会，就是
myself?
他就一直
And
担
he
心，可
kept
能
on worrying about
一个
me
人
what
煮
I
饭，他
meant
就
by
想不
that.
猜这个意思。所以我
But
刚
I
才说
really
下白
had
雪的
no
话
other
呢，没有
meaning.
啥其他
That's
意思。
exactly what I was doing.
yang chondon de jimong ge jivala karsar ba chochi gendan nam ji gagiem za peti der da den bi se jornga la ganzak ganzi ke shungun denjin sinchi ji pama da darti pama nam dingor le jori la ta zawa da roja dan bim jeringa da roja dambi jeringa da tonwa da jikten da robjir dan bi ze so ji pante no ta njamar ji marme da Martin Ji Chokchi Gendan Namla Warur Shago, Ninter, Papa Gendan Namji, Rexipji, Santan Bagam, Rev Jito Bagam, Shangrong de Shobaba, Monshi, Tigla Wang Girte, Nyanang de Cherwagam, Sapji Shanchi, Senhua Chimbo, Tablam Kipi, Gerlong de Cherwapji, Gendan Namji, Tugong Chigbe, Gang Purvi, Surnium Tetak, Yonsif Jibr Shago. Tar Tsacham number Tagbadam, Pagbi Lamla Nipi Gendan Namgi, Sonum Jamso Chembo, Jeno. Telaftene Tarti Pamada, Nin Yankur, Che, Gansong Samji Dingurle Tarte Zeku, Nam Langi Chipper, Yerwa Tang, Tarti Pamar Nam, Dejan, Killan, Tse, Ranwadang. 这个地方藏文当中我就补了几个，倒是能不能补上？就刚才我看到有几个字，好像这个汉文的不同版本，有些版本里面有这个。等级层级第帕马南吉江车个所来的建议，立的话不是做吧车个。Pusum Soba Lab Shepherd Euro, the Itse, Jumden de Garsarba, Chochi Gendan Namji Tomer, Jim the Namla, Lady, Dumjits and Judy Pamanala, Mormon Shago, the Nep Santan Lane, the Zela Roro Shago, Zela Rorotis, and Tomer, Gumba, and Chutinji on the Tejan shall be Skuzilla Chuber Shago, the Esther Gendan Namji, Nerlebadan, Molum, Mormon Shiter, Zot Zela Shober Shago, the Itse, Gerlon Mongerji, Word on Shanchu Sanhua Chimbor Nam Yiran. Kirto. Dene Gerlon Mongerji Wig Donada, Meng Tamcher Jincha de Shiba Ranjan on Eperto. Namjik Tikungatse, Mongerji Wi, Mateni Yeter Girnene, Karamyon Gupi Dinger de Yons, George Kirto. Dene Mongerji, Sandiel Derkata Sorwa, Daka Manian, Kumchoksam da Genden Gifshan Bla Teni. George Girgi, Maun Jikten Nams, Sandi, Lomata, Kachugander Tavi, Tarti Pamagam, Dunjit Sanji Pamanam, Kubra Nisam. Jomdan de Gibkarsar, Chiji Jiban Shinda Lakso, Daki, Ndertan Chapar Gumba Jinla, Flarian, Chiji, Jiban Chi Lakso, Rigiu, Gerlon, Gerlon Madan, Gerbodan, Yachedan, Lombodam, Danandon, Yerkur, Yerpun Chimbodan, Yerpun Chungodan, Yerman Mambo, Taka, Shiba Shishang, Trongzoverando, Tarti Pamadan, Dunjin Sanji Pami Chet, Erdav Dembi Sip Jurnga, Gam, Sanjim Nipiti, Jisam, Gendenji, Graham Zapet. Titre, Roger Dambi Zavadan Tonganam, notably Chochi Gendan la Pravadan, Teta Kitchen, Huadan, Molum, Labrashibe, Tarti Pamanam, Celo Yatabadan, Nad Mebadan, Dingerji Nibadam, Mojonada, Dungeon Sanji Pamanam, Yedak Suji, Dingerle Tardil, Hamid Deva, Cabrajan Tobran Euro, Devena, Sanji Jesus Lubma. Shiba Shishang Zhengzuwa, Doba Dagi, Dir Dag the Darti Pama, Dungit Sanchuji, Darti Pamani, Dungit Sanchuji Pama, Ernam Yilla Chambershiti, Lo Rerir, Dav Dembi Tsip, Jornala, Snudo Zatung Gante, Sanji Dangendan Nala, Perni, Hormon Shago, Terkibe, Pamarnam Gip Civic, General, Sabrin Euro, Divisher, Grand Sanji Jis Batam, Shiki Chundun, Nyamsa Lember Shago, Dice, Gerlon Munger Gi Vadan, Coronamba Je, Gerlon Ma, Gevnin, Machi, Jictin, Yeran de Jundun de Gerson Bala, Mumber Todo, Pamarkiopim Doji Shavar Zoso.
Okay, good. I will skip the footnotes part because I don't want to read my name out. I feel a little bit embarrassed about that. Some people really like to chant their own name out loud, but there are people who get embarrassed, rather, when their names are spoken out. Let us now look at the second half of the sutra. Previously, in the last class, we've already learned that Madhgalyayana's mother was reborn in the lower realm. And Madhgalyayana wanted to make offering to his mother by giving a bowl of food to her. However, she was not able to eat it at all. And at that time, Madhgalyayana was extremely upset and he was crying and then hurried and ran to the Buddha to see the Buddha. And at that time, the Buddha said that your filial piety is good. However, your mother has such deep karmic misdeeds. Therefore, the Buddhist practitioners or ghosts and celestial beings, even the four protectors cannot help her. You can only help her to alleviate her from her suffering by the blessings and the power of the sanghas of the 10 directions. So now let me give you the method, to teach you the method of how to alleviate the suffering of your mother. The Buddha then told Madhgalyayana, saying that on the 15th day of the 7th month, when the monks end the summer retreat, for the sake of your parents of the past 7 generations and your present suffering parents, you should fill a tray with the world's finest delicacies, together with foods of rich variety and taste, and 5 kinds of grains and cereals, and offer it to the monks in the 10 directions. You should also offer them ladles, kettles, basins, perfumed oils, lamps, carpets, and bedding. Over here, it says that you should fill a tray or a basin with the world's finest delicacies. I think over here, if you were to say that it's the basin or a tray, it is quite limiting in terms of the size. You can't fill all of those things, such as beddings, into a tray or a basin. In some other translations, it didn't really say that you should fill a basin or tray with all those delicacies. So it may refer to some bigger container. And if one can make offering with all of those delicacies and those provisions to the sanghas of the 10 directions, it would be of great merit. All the wonderful delicacies, the finest delicacies, the finest bedding or carpets, and all the provisions that you can afford. All of those finest things that you can afford, if you can offer them to the sanghas of the 10 directions, that would be the best method. In terms of making offering, or in terms of the Sangha's retreat at that time. Usually the Sangha would take a 3-month retreat in summer. On the very last day that would conclude the summer retreat is called the Pravarana Day, where throughout the 3 months, the whole Sangha would observe the precepts. For example, one should not go out, and one should not create any conflicts with one another, and one should not enjoy the Sangha's provision without, one should not share the Sangha's provision that's being offered. And then on the very last day, the Pravarana Day, or the day that would end the summer retreat. Or there's another name for it that's called the day the Sangha should atone for any offense. I don't think the lay practitioners know all about these kinds of precepts, but that's okay. Throughout the 3 months, the whole Sangha would not travel outside. They would stay in summer retreat. And at that time, at the end of the 3-month retreat, many of the monastics would get fruition. Therefore, on that day, if one were to make offering to the Sangha, it would be of great merit, because they would attain great realization and their precepts are very pure. That is why you should make offering to the Sangha on that day. Of course, nowadays, different monasteries have different situations. Some of them would arrange a period of time where the Sangha would engage in summer retreat and where they don't. If there's no summer retreat, you can still make offering to the Sangha on the 15th day of the 7th month. But of course, the merit would be different than making offering to those of the Sangha who engaged in summer retreat. However, because of the uncommon causes and condition, indeed, the 15th day of the 7th month is still the day that would delight the Buddha. So this is according to tradition. And therefore, it would still be reasonable to make offering to the Sangha still. It would still be of great merit still. The monastics observe their monastic precepts. The bhikshus, bhikshunis, shramanas, shramanis, all of them would observe their own precepts. The Buddha also talked about the 17 things that one should practice after getting ordained, out of which the 3 things are of the most importance. The first one is called Posatha, and the second one is Vasa, and third one is the last day of observing the Vasa. To the Shramanas and the Shramanis, they would chant the different, they would atone for their offense every 2 weeks. So either the 15th day or the 30th day of the month. As monastics, that is essential. So that's the first one, the Posatha. And the second one, Vasa, is also really important because it is taught by the Buddha that back around that time in India, summer is really long, and during the rainy season, the vegetation is flourishing, and there are many different kinds of insects. If the monastics were to go out begging for alms and walk about, they would step on many insects. Therefore, the Buddha then required that as a monastic you should engage in a 3-month-long Vasa retreat, a summer retreat. When I first got ordained, at that time there were not as many Buddhist rituals 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago at the beginning of the 80th. Ponsukuri Rinpoche at the time made the emphasis saying that all the monasteries should then preserve the tradition of Posatha and Vasa and so on, especially the practice of Pratimoksha vow. So after his advocacy on the recovery of the rituals, he sent many Khenpos to different monasteries to engage in summer retreat. At the time, I had no idea what they are, but they still asked me to go. So out of curiosity at the time, I agreed, and Ponsukuri Rinpoche agreed to let me go. And I stayed in Burkham, in a small monastery back in Burkham in 1986 and 1987. I went to Mount Wutai in 1988. I went to Burkham, that same small monastery again, and 1989 I went to a monastery in Rongshar. At the time, there were 20 or 30 people engaged in the summer retreat. Not too many, but it was a very small temple. It was very, very small. And anyhow, I wanted to say that this is the rough situation of summer retreat back then. And in Tibet, it's rather a bit special, very unique, because the summer retreat in the Tibetan tradition usually would last for a month and a half. According to the Buddhist teachings in the sutra, they should last for 3 months, unless there are special conditions such as war and conflicts and so on. If there are situations like such, then one could engage in summer retreat for only half of the time. But for various reasons, the Tibetan Vinaya masters required the practitioners in the Tibetan area engage in summer retreat for a month and a half long. For various reasons, I couldn't find a very reliable answer for the reason of shortening it to a month and a half. Anyhow, that's the tradition in the Tibetan region. But it ends on the 15th day of the 7th month, which is exactly the same as taught by the Buddha. During the 3 months of summer retreat, or 1.5 months in terms of the Tibetan tradition, one should not speak ill of the others, should not create any conflicts with one another. But on the last day of Vasa, the summer retreat, on the day of atoning for any offense that might have happened during the summer retreat, then the Sangha would start atoning or confess, and then after that, all of the provisions could be shared with everyone. So that's the last day of Vasa. On top of that, the Sangha should talk about the 12 different characteristics of Shakyamuni Buddha. There was once I give teaching on the 12 characteristics of the Buddha for 3 times, and it lasted till 2 or 3 a.m. Traditionally, one should talk about that for the whole night long, but around 2 or 3 a.m., everyone got really tired, and I thought, well, what's the point if everyone fell asleep? So I asked them to visualize that we're studying and teaching for the whole night long. Anyhow, that's the Posatha. So all the Sangha, including the Shramanas, should engage in the summer retreat. But for those of the lay practitioners or people who did not receive any precepts, they cannot engage in the summer retreat together with the monastics. Anyhow, for those of you who have the motivation and aspiration to build centers elsewhere, it would be the best to keep the tradition of Posada, the Vasa, and the last day of Vasa. People may ask, for such a large Buddhist institute like us, why don't we have a summer retreat? In fact, the Buddha answered, the Pontsog Rinpoche answered that question before. He said that according to the Tibetan tradition, if we were to have summer retreat over here, then we would receive lots of offering. But people may get jealous or upset with the provisions that we might receive. Therefore, Pontsog Rinpoche specifically pointed out that we should not engage in summer retreat over here in the Buddhist Institute. However, we could send different temples and different monastics elsewhere to engage in summer retreats. Therefore, there were many Sangha members would go to different monasteries and engage in summer retreat, and they don't receive as many offerings, which doesn't really create any problem. So it's not really in contradictory with what Pontsog Rinpoche had taught. And over here, the Buddha said that the 5 kinds of greens and cereals and fruits as well. So together with foods of rich variety, there are people who would say that one should make offering of fruits such as apples and bananas and all of those. But jokes aside, in fact, what it refers to is the different types of greens and cereals or crops, various kinds of food that can be enjoyed. The offerings may include what we can touch, what we can feel, what we can taste, what we can smell. For example, in terms of food, those are the things that people can taste. And in terms of water and basin, those are to touch because one could use those to take shower. Perfume oils are to smell, and lamp oils or lamps are to see. Though there's nothing included for something to hear, and there's no mentioning of anything related to medicine or nourishment for the body, but mainly it talks about the different types of food should be offerings. At that time, one could make offering to the Sanghas of the 10 directions after taking such offerings. Over here in the sutra, it says that on this day, the monks of great virtue may be those who contemplate on a mountain, or those who have attained the fourfold fruits. In Tibet, in fact, it's similar. In some monasteries and temples, one could make the boundaries and make sure that their retreat house would be the place that they would not step out and they would practice meditation in it. Within wartime or when there's great conflicts or great obstacles, one can have such kind of opportunity to go out, and however, one has to come back within 7 days. For those of you who had engaged in summer retreat, you should probably know. Anyhow, there are monastics who would practice in mountains, and for those ones who receive the 4 fruits, they can practice under the trees. Though it is very uncommon nowadays, maybe some of the Theravada countries, the countries that upholds Theravada traditions, they would practice in such a way. But in other countries, I think nowadays the monastics would practice in their own huts, and sometimes very beautifully adorned rooms, very nicely decorated. And even if they want to sit under the tree, they would build a glass hut underneath the tree. So different era, different needs. There are then, of course, also the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas with the 6. Those who freely instructed those with 6 supernatural powers, or the bodhisattvas in the 10 bhumis who have transformed themselves into bhikshus. Some of those monastics are transformed into bhikshus, though they have already attained Pratika Buddhahood or the Bodhisattvahood. They would transform themselves into bhikshus to receive the offerings. Those monks who live among people receive the meal offered after the retreat in the same mind. They all keep the pure precepts, and their virtues, worthy of enlightened ones, are profound and all-pervasive. So the monastics, they uphold great merits, the ocean of merits, according to the Chinese translation. I believe last year during our studies of the Sutra of Praising the Noble Qualities of the Sangha, where it is stated that the supreme noble masters of the Sangha, they are the source of cultivation of the sentient beings' merit. They would be able to bestow the fruition of supreme human and celestial fruitions. Therefore, in this world, there is really no other merit field that is more supreme than the Sangha in the jewel of Sangha in the 3 jewels. So the merit of the Sangha is indeed very great. As I said yesterday, the Buddha told his aunt, saying that I will make your offering to the Sangha, because in this way you would generate bigger merit. Because in certain situations, the merit of the Sangha would surpass the merit of the Buddha, especially in the Dark Age, since the Buddha has already passed into parinirvana. Therefore, the Sangha would represent would represent Buddhism. So the Sangha has such merit. Those who make offering to the monks after the retreat will enable their present presence, their parents of the past 7 generations, and their 6 close relatives. In terms of the 6 close relatives, it could be the fathers, mothers, and brothers and sisters. And it doesn't really necessarily say that it's just those. It could be the uncles and aunts from the father's and mother's side, or it could be the maids, servants, or your friends or disciples. Those all would belong to the category of the relatives or the kins. So if you were to have the mind of helping the others and to wish for the longevity of your parents and health, it's quite important to chant the sutra. The 6 close relatives and retinues refers to the kind of sentient beings that you made close connections with for lifetimes. Their relatives will, in due course, be liberated. Food and clothing will be given to them spontaneously. If their parents are still alive, they will enjoy a blissful lifespan of 100 years. Over here, it also says that because of chanting for the sutra, then the parents would enjoy longevity. That is to say, for the parents of this lifetime, and for the parents of the past 7 generations, they would be able to be born in celestial realm. So over here it says that if their parents are deceased, their parents of the past 7 generations will be born in heaven. They will freely transform themselves to be born in the light of heavenly flowers and receive infinite pleasure. So they would enjoy all of the kinds of delights and bliss. Just think about the parents of the past 7 generations. I believe nowadays people can only remember the names of your older generations, maybe 1 or 2 generations, and don't even mention about the parents of the past generations. We can see that the merit is indeed quite great because it could bestow such kind of merit and blessings to the parents of the present life as well as the past 7 times. Also, the 6 close relatives as well as retinues. So you can pray for their well-being by chanting this sutra. Then the Buddha enjoined the monks in the 10 directions and commanded the assembly, saying that, first of all, for the sake of the donors, you must pray for their parents of the past 7 generations. You should practice contemplation and then, with a settled mind, receive the food. When you first receive the food, you should place it in front of a stupa. After you finish your prayers, you may help yourself to the food. The translation over here, the Chinese translation rather, is a little bit different in terms of the order. So we have to really pay attention to the order that is. We have to observe and pay attention to how the order is taken. First of all, you should pray for the donor's parents and the past 7 generations to gain liberation. As the monastics, you should practice contemplation and practice in the settled mind with great focus in terms of your mind, in terms of your action. The Buddha said that all of the monastics should practice with right mindfulness, and then you can receive the food. Because the food would be of great variety. So when you first receive the food, after receiving the food, the Buddha taught that you should place it in front of a stupa. You should make offering to the Buddha or to a stupa or to a picture of a Buddha or a statue. Even if you can't find any pictures or stupas or sculptures, at least you can visualize and make offering to the Buddha first by your visualization. For example, whenever we receive offerings, we would make the offering to the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas. Even when we drink tea, before we drink the tea, according to the Nimapa tradition, we would make offering to Pamasambhava, to Bodhisattva, to Trisam. In fact, there are a group of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas we would make offering to first before we drink. And this is taken in great importance, especially during summer retreat. Therefore, we have to chant this sutra. We have to chant those before we take any offering. According to the Chinese mainland tradition, there's also such kind of chantings as well. According to the fourfold Vinaya, it says that the one who makes the offering with generosity will definitely gain the corresponding benefits. If one were to make the offering for the benefit of happiness, one would definitely be able to gain happiness. This is quite an important verse that is included in the fourfold Vinaya. And in the fourfold Vinaya, it talked about its source or where it came from. It says that when the Buddha was practicing in ascetic and the four great kings offered him a golden bowl and a silver bowl that's filled with lots of honey and lots of food, but the Buddha did not accept it. Rather, with the miraculous penetration, he transformed those bowls into ordinary bowls. There's also another version of the similar story, rather, where instead of the four great celestial kings, it was Bimbisara, the king Bimbisara, who made offering to the Buddha as well as the Sangha. And then the Buddha told him this particular verse. The translation, however, is a little bit different, where it says that according to the fourfold Vinaya, it says that if one were to make the offering for the sake of happiness, but according to the Vinaya Sutra, it says that in order to benefit others, one practice generosity. So there's a little bit of difference in terms of translation. But other than that, maybe it's because of the difference of the translator, but other than that, the translation is similar. In mainland, there are different chantings before offerings as well. For example, included in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that after finishing the food, I wish all the sentient beings will be able to gain the benefit of genuine Dharma. So after having the food, the monastic would make such genuine offering and genuine aspiration. May all sentient beings gain the benefit of true Dharma. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, there are 241 I shall wish, or the verses that starts with I wish. So as monastics, let it be during summer retreat or not, if there are people who make the offering, you should make simple dedication of merit. And if you were to have some time, it would be the best for you to chant the Three Jewel Sutra or the King of Aspiration or the Ullambana Sutra to make dedication with this to the donors with all these chanting of the sutras. That would be very meritorious. It would be of great merit and it would be very important. So the Buddha then over here says that at the beginning the Buddha said that the donors should make such kind of offering, and then over here the Buddha required the Sangha to say that after receiving the offering you should all make dedication of merit to them. Of course, if you don't want to receive the offering, that's okay. It is up to you. There are the ones who didn't want to receive the offering, but because of their situation, they have to receive the offering. And there are the ones who don't have, who didn't have good materialistic providings at the beginning, but slowly, because they became a great master, they don't really chant and dedicate merit anymore. Anyhow, if you were to receive the offerings from the donors, at least you should rededicate the merit to them. There are some compos and some supervisors of the Sangha would say that, well, you should chant and rededicate the merit for the donors because this is the offering made for that. It's not that you have to work for them and it's not that you have to work for them in other ways. It is that you have to rededicate the merit. At that time, then Madhgalayana, along with all the bodhisattvas in the Great Assembly, greatly rejoiced, and Madhgalayana's painful cries ceased once and for all. Because at the beginning, Madhgalayana was crying out loud, and after hearing the Buddha's teaching, he stopped crying. At that time, on that very day, or at that time, not sure exactly when, according to the Chinese translation, it says present or at the time, not quite sure when exactly. But at that time, Madhigalaya's mother was freed from the suffering in the realm of hungry ghosts, in which she had been living for a kalpa. So she was finally liberated. We can see that the merit of the three jewels, or the merit of making offering to the Sangha, is immeasurable. According to some other translations, it says that Madhigalayana's mother liberated from the suffering realm for 3 kalpas. Right away, she was liberated. Originally, she was supposed to suffer in the realm for a whole kalpa, but right now, in that moment, she was liberated. According to some other explanations, it says for 1 kalpa, but over here it says that she was liberated for the suffering of as long as the 3 kalpas. Arhats have the 4 kinds of not knowing, and Madhigalayan being an Arhat, he does not understand how far it goes, doesn't know the extent of the time. But the Buddha saw that I saw that his mother would be born in the Pure Land of the Buddha, of accumulation of light. It was taught in other teachings. For example, according to the Dharma Jewel Forest, it talks about the 16 kings after hearing the teachings given in the Ullambana Sutra, where they heard about how the mother of Madhigalayan was liberated upon hearing this sutra, or upon upholding the sutra. Then King Bimbisara was extremely happy, and he made all kinds of offerings that fills the various containers. The offerings including gold, silver, coral, and agates, so on and so forth. That fills 500 silver containers and 500 gold containers. After he got back to his own country, he started to fill the various containers with the 7 jewels and make offerings with various materialistic offerings. And then his parents of the 7 lifetimes pacified the negative deeds that would make them to be reborn in birth and death for 72 kalpas. The story of King Bimbisara indeed touched many people around him, and then including, for example, the great benefactors as well as the mundane citizens, though they don't have that much things to offer, but according to their personal belongings, they made as much as possible to the Sangha. And after such, their parents also purified such kind of negative deeds for 72 kalpas. We can see with the blessings of the Buddha, many miraculous things happened in India back then. So we can see that at the time, the mother of Madhigalayan attained liberation at that time. And then Madhigalayan addressed the Buddha by saying that my parents who raised me have received the power of the virtues of the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Thanks to the spiritual power of the monks, the monastics, if all future disciples of the Buddha are filial to their parents and uphold this Ullambana Sutra, then he will be able to, they will be able to deliver their present parents and their parents of the past 7 generations. Is this not so? Madhigalayan, upon hearing that his mother was liberated, and he's saying that this is really wonderful. So would all the sentient beings, upon relying this method, be able to attain liberation as well? So he started posing this question there. Through this method of making the offering to the Sangha among us of the 10 directions by making offering with filling the basin of Ullambana, would it be able to save the parents of the 7 generations? Murugalayana is indeed of a wonderful practitioner. Not only he thought about liberating his own mother. After his mother attained liberation, he continued to ask question whether the sentient beings could also attain liberation through such kind of method. And then the Buddha said to Murugalayana, saying that very well, this is such a great question. Excellent question, excellent. So that's the question. That's when the Buddha started saying that you ask a wonderful question. This is a wonderful question. The Buddha felt that this question would be of great benefit, and it's very practical. Therefore, the Buddha said that this is a very good question because I was going to tell you. I will certainly speak on this since you have now asked the question. In fact, not only the mother of yours would be attaining liberation. In fact, anyone, they will also attain such kind of liberation. I think the Chinese practitioners are indeed very fortunate because you have such wonderful sutra to liberate the parents of yours. Therefore, we should definitely extend our great gratitude towards the Dharma Rajas as well as the kings of the past. For example, around Liang Wu Emperor's time, that's around the 400 or 500 CE, and that was the time when Ullambana Dharma Assembly was popular. In Tang Dynasty, lots of kings would also host such kind of Dharma Assembly. For such reason, I really think that we need to pay great gratitude towards the propagation of the wonderful kings of the past. Without their effort, we will not be able to receive such a wonderful sutra, and we will not be able to have such great sadhana to practice in order to liberate our parents of the past life and of the present time. The young monastics, I think that we all carry a certain sense of responsibility. We should continue with the tradition as well as the sadhanas and the lineage of the past. We should look at how the practitioners engaged in practice back in the ancient times, and we should continue such kind of tradition. Nowadays, I notice lots of the monasteries look really beautiful. They're quite beautiful to look at. However, if there's no teaching, if there's no sadhana, if there's no tradition, if there's no chanting, then such kind of monasteries are not considered as appropriate. We should engage in studying contemplation and practice, and we shouldn't change the words inside of a sadhana. There are some of the verses are very necessary because they are of great blessings from the great masters, and we need to understand how to chant them as well. There is the lineage of chanting. There are lots of old monks. Nowadays, they are forgotten, or they're already very old, or some of them have already died. Slowly and slowly, if we do not study the chanting, the tradition of chanting, the sound of chanting, then the lineage, the tradition of chanting would slowly be lost. Therefore, whenever there is a summer retreat, whenever there's a Ullambana Dharma Assembly, we should try our best to study and try our best to maintain this kind of tradition. Anyhow, the Buddha over here said that excellent questions. And then he said that, oh, noble son of a good family, if there are bhikshus, bhikshunis, kings, crown princes, ministers, prime ministers, head officials, as well as various civil servants or tens of thousands of commoners, the common citizens who are filial to their present parents and their parents of the past 7 generations. For one who has such kind of kindness and compassion towards their parents of this lifetime and past 7 generations, they should, on the 15th day of the 7th month, this is considered as the day that is of a great merit. It is considered a joyous day for the Buddha and a day after the retreat. One should offer a meal of various tastes on a tray to monks who participated in the retreat. They should then ask the monks to pray that their present parents will have a lifespan of 100 years, free of illness and all kinds of suffering, and that their parents of the past 7 generations may be free from the suffering of the realm of hungry ghosts and be born in the realm of heavenly beings, in the celestial realm, which is accompanied by infinite happiness and pleasure. Nowadays, I think people are very different in terms of how we treat the parents with great respect or care. People think that, buying them cell phones and buying them materialistic things would be considered as kindness. However, other than those materialistic offering that we can make to the parents, in fact, it is more important for us to repay them the kind of wealth of spirituality. If they can have or develop any kinds of faith, that would be really wonderful. Without faith, at least if you can practice or engage in any kinds of practice of Dharma, that would be also very crucial. And then the Buddha continued to say that the Buddha enjoyed men and women of rejoiced the men and women of the good families by saying that disciples of Buddha who practice filial piety should constantly think of their parents and make offering to their parents of the past 7 generations. In fact, without the parents, we would not know where we would be. We have to consider about the kindness that's bestowed by our parents. Without them, we would not be alive now. We have to think also about the parents of our past generations. In fact, lots of the parents, they're suffering a lot. They bear lots of pain. Some of them, though they are not of good physical health, they still worry about their children's health. The mindset of many parents, we can feel that they are of great, deep kindness to all of us. So, on the 15th day of the 7th month, we should constantly think with great kindness and think about our parents with great kindness. This is the festival of the Ullambana. And as the Buddha's disciple, you should practice and uphold this teaching. If you really couldn't find anyone to practice this, then at least you can make the offering to the Sangha, to the 3 jewels, even make offering of certain fruits and different kinds of offering in front of the reliance of the 3 jewels, and then chant this Ullambana Sutra and then rededicate the merit. If you can't find the Sangha, then that's okay. Even on this 15th day of the 7th month, if you can make offering in front of the 3 jewels, the representation of the 3 jewels on your shrine hall, and chant this sutra and rededicate the merit to your parents of this lifetime and of the 7 past generations. And whenever you have time, you should, with this kind of way, to then liberate your parents, to cross them over the ocean of existence, and then to pray for the happiness of your present life parents. We will later chant it as well. I believe many of you your parents are probably still alive, but for myself, both of my parents are already deceased, and this time I'm giving this teaching is to repay the kindness of my parents. That's why I translated this sutra into Tibetan language and give teachings to all of you. This is my aspiration, and I hope that with this merit they would attain great happiness and not be falling into the three lower realms. As over here, the sutra says that all disciples of the Buddha should uphold this teaching. According to Master Oyi, in his book, he said that if you do not uphold this, then you are not of a Buddhist practitioner. And he said that if you don't practice this Ullambana offering, then you are not considered as a Buddhist because you don't have filial piety. Then you're not. If you don't even care about your parents, how can you be considered as a genuine Buddhist practitioner? This sutra is indeed of great supreme merit. I am very thankful to all of you who are sitting here. Without you, if none of you are listening to my teaching, I wouldn't have the opportunity to give this teaching. Though I don't have as many followers or audience over here, but I am sure that many of you would receive the teaching through the method of sound or maybe transcripts, and then I'm sure you will understand what Ullambana Sutra is talking about. So the precious treasure of the Dharma, of the sutras, we should try our best to uphold, to propagate. We should try our best not to let it to be disappeared in the long river of the history. This is of crucial value, and it is of each and every one of our responsibility. This Ullambana Sutra was very popular back in India, and later it was passed on to China, and then influenced Japan, Korea, and then even North Korea. It's very popular over there as well. Malaysia, Singapore, wherever there are the Chinese disciples, in fact, there are the Ullambana festival. The practitioners over here, especially whenever you have the opportunity, maybe at that time many of us won't be in this world anymore, but on the 15th day of the 7th month, maybe you will have the opportunity to host such kind of ceremonies in various monasteries, various centers, even without any monastics. I think the lay practitioners could gather together and then make offering to the Buddha, and then have a vegetarian meal, and then rededicate the merit. Nowadays, I notice that how people really enjoyed having meal together. If you have such an opportunity to have meal together, then I encourage you to chant this Ullambana Sutra and then rededicate such merit to all the sentient beings that has always been our mothers. That has been our mothers in the past lives. Of course, if there are sanghas, that would be great. Without monastics, you can still generate bodhicitta, because the most joyous thing of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is that when the sentient beings generate bodhicitta, whenever you generate bodhicitta, then chant this sutra and rededicate the merit to all sentient beings, the Buddha would definitely be joyful. Especially this day is called the joyous day of the Buddha. Therefore, on such a special day, I really encourage all of you to enjoy and uphold this sutra. So at that time, on hearing the discourse of the Buddha, Madhgalyayana and the 4 groups of followers were delighted and paid reverence for him. Now let's chant this and then rededicate the merit, okay?